Okay, so welcome back to these plans. I want to finish these 100%. And as I stated before, this is probably a less expensive set of plans because it has no panel schedule. What's a panel schedule? A panel schedule is a list itemized per the circuit numbers in this sub panel that you're going to be installing that lists what the loads go to. A sub panel or a panel can also be called a load center, meaning what's the load of the wire that it's feeding and the breaker number. So this would be an example of a panel schedule. I like to do mine. I'll go through the house. I'll start at one end and have one person at the sub panel, turn all the lights on, turn everything on that's reasonable, and then you stand in one place and you go down the breakers, flipping them on and off. And when it's off, you say, yeah, then you label that one. You take that home, type it up, put your logo, your phone number, laminate it. Then I affix one permanently inside the sub panel or panel. And then I print a second one, give it to the customer to put in their kitchen junk drawer. Sometimes these panels are located outside. Generally, things trip a lot more often in the rain. Therefore, if they have something inside they can read before walking out to the panel and opening it, and it's wet, water and electricity, never good. But at least they'll know, oh, my lights are off. It's probably, what he marked on there. And we can go over how I do the lights, smoke detectors, and plugs on every single job. I do it the same. Unless it's instructed differently by the electrical engineer, then I'll follow their plan. But generally, I've learned from them, so we're all on the same page. But anyway, so again, you'll just start in one place, have the bathroom fan on, click the breakers off down the line. When it goes off, you yell off, turn it back on to double check it, off again, yes, confirmed, okay. That's space number 5. Mark it on your panel schedule, and that's how it goes. So since this plan does not have a panel schedule, I would go through and do it. The panels on something like this would probably be a 12 space. It's pretty standard. 100 amp sub or a 60 amp sub would be plenty to power all this stuff. So generally those are 12 spaces. And just so you know, behind the panel, this is how the busing would run. This would be one leg of the 110. This would be the other leg. So you have your A, B sides. I would label this panel A just for ADU. And then I always put in parentheses whether it was E, existing, or N for new. That way, whoever the inspector is, you're just that much more on top of things. Sometimes there's things existing in a garage. I never put used equipment in or use older equipment. I always recommend going with new. You're good for the next 50 years probably. And the cost of these panels, you're talking less than $100. It's just the right thing to do. So even though there'll be 2 breakers here, this would be 2, this would be 1, they're on A phase. The next one, even though they're right across from each other, they're on B phase. And we can go over that kind of more as we get into electricity if you guys want. But basically, just so you know what's behind the panel, that's how they would go. So again, getting into the panel schedule itself. Number 1 is always, on all the jobs I do, smoke detectors. It's just a safety thing. It's just always the way I've done it. It's a lot of times the way it's written. So I always do number 1, smoke detectors. If it's an older house and there are no interconnected or wired smoke detectors and you've put the new sub panel in, lighting would be number 1. Generally, everything switched is over here on the odd side, and your plugs and plugins are on the even side. Again, it's just the way I do it. Makes it super simple. When I go to jobs I've done and I need to service something, I know exactly how it's done. If I send one of my guys that hasn't been to the job yet, they know, oh, your lights are off. It's probably circuit 1. Let me go check that real quick. So just keep it uniform. Going back to the philosophy of keeping everything simple. Keep it simple. Switch things on the left, on the odd side if you can. Even side, plug things. So like I said, lighting is the next one. If there's 2 circuits of lights, it'd be 3 and 5. Same deal. More along the lines of lighting or things that are switched, I would do bath fan next on this. Again, that's switched. I would then do bath GFI. even though it's not switched. It's just super easy. Smoke sliding bath, all in the same zone. And then since this only has 12 spaces, and when I went over here to go, number 2 is always plugs. It could be plugs, living room, dining room, if it's a bigger house, and those are arc fault nowadays, AFCI, but I put AF. Plugs are arc fault. So this would probably only need 1 plug circuit because it's pretty small. We always need our 2 kitchen circuits, kitchen 1 and kitchen 2 for our countertop. That's a no-brainer. Then next, just finish off the kitchen. Fridge, microwave, and we could split this one, do an AB here, and we could do garbage disposal, dishwasher, and hood and stove. Not a big draw on any of those. This is very seldom used. This is very seldom used. This is maybe used. Well, it depends on the person, but and the stove is just the plug and the igniter. So pretty standard there. Moving back over to this side, I would do the outside GFI. I always put the outside GFIs on their own because inevitably, if you wire it into another circuit, whether it's one of these slam and jam track homes, someone always wires that thing to another plug on the GFCI side inside the house, and you'll get a call. It's like, hey, my hallway's not working, the vacuum blew it, and you're looking all around for everything. You've got power on the breaker, no power inside the wall, and then all of a sudden you go, you got any balconies? And you find some second-story balcony with a GFI. The guy who wired that house tied in on the wrong side. So I put the outside GFIs on their own. Gardeners use them. They plug in these big blowers. You never know. You have some handyman over there using a table saw. It's just always good to put the outside GFI on its own. Then I'd put AC, because nowadays everybody has AC. And then you always want to have a spare if you can. Just like I've always said, 80% of everything spare. And I put that one in parentheses because the inspector's going to say, what are you going to put in? It's nothing, but it's a spare breaker. I'm allowed to put a future in. Future's our code. So if they add a fountain, if they add whatever, irrigation timer, they will add something. We have never stopped adding electrical on houses. So that's how I would do that panel schedule. Again, I would type that up. I would laminate it, put your license number on it, your phone number. So if there ever is a problem, they got your phone number, your logo, make it super professional. All my customers really appreciate this, but it ties into blueprint reading and your interpretation of the blueprints to have a good, solid, no-brain, super understandable panel schedule for the customer and for you if you ever come back to service it. I'll take your questions on Zoom.